In Christian tradition, he is the cursed man par excellence. The one whose name became a synonym for betrayal. Judas Iscariot. The man who, for 30 pieces of silver, supposedly handed Jesus over to the authorities. The unfaithful disciple, the traitor, the damned among the damned. But what if we have been wrong for nearly 2,000 years? What if Judas was not the traitor, but the initiate? Not the enemy of Jesus, but his closest confidant. Somewhere in the Egyptian desert, a manuscript hidden for 17 centuries told another version of the story. That is what a mysterious text claims to do. The Gospel of Judas. A forgotten gospel, rejected, declared heretical, and rediscovered almost by accident in the 1970s. This is the story of a text that could reshuffle the cards of Christianity. A forbidden text, fragmentary, dangerous to some, fascinating to others. Welcome to the enigma of the Gospel of Judas. To understand the Gospel of Judas, we have to go far back in time. Back to the 2nd century after Christ. At that time, Christianity was not yet a unified religion. It was a network of scattered communities, sometimes in disagreement. Different groups argued over how to interpret the words of Jesus. Some insisted on faith, others on moral rules. Others on a secret knowledge reserved for a few initiates. Within this religious ferment, one family of movements stands out. Gnosis, or the Gnostics. For them, the material world is imperfect, even evil. We were not made for this earth, but for a higher world. The body is a prison. And only inner knowledge, hidden revelation, can free the soul. It is in this context that a strange, provocative text emerges. A gospel attributed to Judas. A gospel that does not recount the life of Jesus day by day, but that will overturn the role of one of his most controversial disciples. The Gospel of Judas, as we know it today, is found in one specific manuscript. The Chakos Codex. A small bound papyrus book, written in Coptic, the language of Christian Egypt. Experts estimate that this codex was copied towards the end of the 3rd or the beginning of the 4th century. Inside, we find several texts with a Gnostic flavor. A book of Peter, a text called Letter of Peter to Philip, and other spiritual writings. And, among them, the Gospel of Judas. But bear this in mind. This Coptic codex is only a copy of an older text. Probably written in Greek, perhaps around the middle of the 2nd century. Between the original and the manuscript that has come down to us, there is already more than a century of distance. And then, nothing. The Chakos Codex disappears into the sands of history for about 1,700 years. In the 1970s, somewhere in Egypt, clandestine diggers explore a cave or an ancient tomb near the city of Minya. The details are blurry, the accounts contradictory. But they all mention a small papyrus codex found in a cavity, amid remains of coffins and ancient Christian objects. The manuscript is sold on the antiquities black market. It passes from hand to hand. It's kept in a chest. taken abroad. Then, in a detail that is almost absurd, tragic. At one point in its journey, the Codex is stored in a freezer. Yes, a book over 1,600 years old. Placed in a modern refrigerator. The papyrus contracts, dries out, the ink deteriorates. The pages begin to crack into pieces. Each handling, each change of owner destroys this fragile witness of antiquity a little more. When, at last, in the 2000s, specialists manage to obtain the codex, it is already half in crumbs. Many pages are missing. Others are almost illegible. One thing is clear. This text could easily have disappeared forever. What has reached us is almost a miracle. In the early 2000s, a private foundation acquires the Chakos Codex. Experts in papyrology, restoration, and ancient languages are called in. The manuscript no longer looks like a book. It looks like a puzzle. Dozens of fragments, sometimes tiny, incomplete lines and torn edges. The restorers moisten, clean, flatten the papyri. They reassemble the pieces like a gigantic game of patience. A fragment of a letter here, a piece of a word there, a matching margin further on. Little by little, a structure appears. Pages are reconstructed. They are numbered, photographed, recorded in high definition. Then come the linguists. They read the Coptic. Compare it with other texts. Guess missing words from the context. This work takes several years. In the end, the team obtains a fairly coherent Coptic text, with large gaps, but enough to understand the essentials. We are dealing with a gospel attributed to Judas. And what it tells is unlike anything found in the Bible. In 2006, the news breaks. The media jump on the story. Headlines are spectacular. The secret of Judas finally revealed. The gospel that redeems the traitor. Judas, the favorite disciple of Jesus. Book sales follow. For an apocryphal text nearly 2,000 years old, it is an extraordinary success. The general public discovers that, beneath the surface of Christian history, there exist texts that were never included in the Bible. Gospels of Thomas, Philip, Mary. And now, that of Judas. But what does this text actually say? Why is it so shocking? And above all, what does it change in the story we thought we knew? First of all, an important point. The Gospel of Judas is not a full narrative of the life of Jesus, like Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John. It is mainly a series of dialogues. Scenes where Jesus speaks to his disciples. And above all, to Judas. In the canonical Gospels of the Bible, Judas is presented as the disciple who betrays. The one who hands Jesus over to the authorities. In the Gospel of Judas, everything is almost reversed. Jesus laughs at the other disciples because they don't truly understand his message. They cling to appearances, to sacrifices, to religious rites. Judas, on the other hand, is different. He is the one who asks the difficult questions. The one who senses the hidden dimension of the Master. The text suggests that Jesus reveals to Judas secrets the others cannot bear. The world, he explains, is not the work of the supreme, benevolent God, but of a lower being. The visible cosmos is the result of a series of emanations, powers, angels. In this Gnostic vision, matter is inferior. And the true goal of the soul is to break free from the body. In that framework, the crucifixion is no longer only a sacrifice for the sins of the world. It also becomes a way to escape the material prison. And this is where the role of Judas is transformed. In this text, Jesus asks Judas to hand him over. Not as an act of betrayal, but as an act of obedience to a secret plan. Judas thus becomes the instrument through which Jesus abandons his body and returns to the spiritual realm. In other words, what the official story presents as treason, the Gospel of Judas presents as a necessary sacrifice, carried out by the most clear-sighted disciple. The cursed traitor becomes the misunderstood initiate. The Gospel of Judas does not appear out of nowhere. It bears the mark of second-century Gnostic circles. In these circles, inner knowledge is more important than public faith. Matter is seen as a fall, and salvation as an awakening. The God portrayed in the Gospel of Judas is not exactly the same as in the canonical Gospels. There is a supreme, distant God, and lower entities, responsible for the creation of this imperfect world. This text criticizes ordinary religious practices, sacrifices, rituals, which it describes as vain and illusory. It offers an elitist vision. Only a few rare chosen ones, like Judas, have access to the true knowledge. We can understand why such a text, which questions the very structure of official religion, had little chance of being included in a canon intended for all believers. From 2006 onwards, the Gospel of Judas is at the center of conversations. Some see in it a true rehabilitation of Judas, a way of saying, what if we condemn this man too quickly? What if his act had a hidden spiritual dimension? Others, on the contrary, are alarmed. For them, this is a late text. The doctrinal speculation of a marginal group, far from the Christianity that would become mainstream. The media love this clash. On one side, fans of mystery, esotericism, conspiracies. On the other, theologians and historians, who remind us that the Gospel of Judas is not a contemporary report, but a doctrinal, polemical work, produced by a minority current. The question arises, should we take this text literally? Or read it as a Gnostic manifesto, a theological parable, another way to interpret the figure of Judas? Before going further, we must recall something essential. The Gospel of Judas has reached us in a very incomplete form. The Codex was severely damaged. Whole pages disappeared. On those that remain, lines are erased, words unreadable. Scholars have therefore had to reconstruct what they could, by comparing, inferring, sometimes filling in blanks. To this we must add the chain of translations. The original Greek text is lost. Then comes the Coptic translation, then modern translations into English, French, and others. At every stage, there is a risk of error, interpretation, lost nuance. Some passages were first translated in a way that seemed to clearly redeem Judas. Later, other scholars proposed slightly different translations, less flattering, more ambiguous. Yet, whatever this gospel suggests, there is another image of Judas that refuses to disappear. It is the image preserved in the canonical tradition. The image not of a secret initiate, but of a man crushed by guilt. According to the Gospel of Matthew, when Judas sees that Jesus has been condemned, Something breaks inside him. The text says he is seized with remorse. He takes the 30 pieces of silver, the price of betrayal, and goes back to the chief priests and the elders. There, he utters a sentence that rarely appears in our simplified memory of the traitor. He says, "I have sinned, for I have betrayed innocent blood." The response he receives is cold, almost bureaucratic. What is that to us? That's your responsibility. In other words, the men who paid for the betrayal refuse to carry any share of the weight. They hand the burden back to the one who can no longer bear it. Judas throws the money into the temple. 30 pieces of silver, scattering on the stone floor, echoing in the emptiness. Then he leaves, alone. According to Matthew, he goes away and hangs himself. It is a brief scene, told in just a few lines. But behind those lines, we glimpse a night of absolute despair. A man who has seen his plan turn into horror. A man who may have believed that Jesus would escape. That the arrest would be temporary, that somehow everything would still be under control. And now the verdict has fallen. The machine of condemnation is rolling forward. The consequence of his act is no longer reversible. Between the moment when he throws the silver and the moment when the rope tightens, there is an abyss that the text does not describe but that we can imagine. Self-hatred, shame, an unbearable sense of having crossed a line from which there is no return. The book of Acts, in the New Testament, offers a different, darker version of his end. There, Judas acquires a field with the reward of his wickedness, and he dies in a brutal, almost grotesque way. He falls, his body bursts open, and his intestines spill out. Between these two accounts, later generations have filled the gaps with imagination and speculation. Some have wondered, if Judas regretted his act so deeply, was he really beyond forgiveness? Could the man who threw the silver back and confessed his sins still be nothing but a monster? Others have gone further and asked more disturbing questions. Did Judas truly die by his own hand? Or did someone help him disappear? In a world of power struggles, of fear, of early conflicts between groups, it is not impossible to imagine that a traitor who knew too much could become a dangerous witness. A man who had seen the inside face of both Jesus' circle and the religious authorities. A man who had been the link between the two camps. Was his death really a lonely act of despair under a tree? Or could it have been a convenient death, later interpreted as suicide, to erase a troublesome figure? The sources are few, contradictory, charged with theology and moral judgment. But this tension between remorse and punishment, between guilt and possible violence from others, adds another layer of complexity to the figure of Judas. On the one hand, a man who says, "I have sinned, for I have betrayed innocent blood," and who cannot live with that weight. On the other, a name that becomes a curse. A symbol, almost no longer a human being, but a label we stick on anyone who betrays. Somewhere between those extremes, between the rope of suicide and the brutal death described in Acts. Between sincere repentance and the image of the damned traitor. The real Judas disappears. And when we put the Gospel of Judas next to these canonical stories, the contrast becomes even sharper. Here, a text that suggests a chosen disciple, the only one who truly understood the plan. There, texts that show a man eaten alive by remorse, returning the money, unable to bear what he has done, and dying in disgrace. Between these versions, Judas becomes less a simple character and more a mirror for our questions about responsibility, forgiveness, and the price of our choices. He is at once the traitor, the penitent, the victim of his own act, and maybe even the victim of the way others chose to tell his story. And it is against this background of tangled traditions and conflicting endings that the Gospel of Judas appears and offers yet another face of the same man. In the end, the Gospel of Judas does not offer us a straightforward heroic rehabilitation of Judas. It places him at the center, gives him a key role, but is that glorification or a more complex kind of portrayal? What we read today may be only a shadow of the original text. A partial echo, fragile, uncertain. So why does the Gospel of Judas fascinate us so much? First, because it touches on an extreme figure, the ultimate traitor. In all cultures, the traitor is the one we never forgive. Rethinking his image, giving him another story, means questioning our need for a perfect scapegoat. Next, because it speaks to us about what we do not see. About a meaning hidden behind events. About a secret plan, a truth accessible only to a chosen few. In a world where many doubt official versions, where institutions, governments, authorities are often suspected, an ancient text that claims to reveal the other side of the story is bound to attract interest. There is also the spiritual dimension. The idea that we are not at home in this material world, that our soul is in exile, and that a path of knowledge can bring us back to an invisible homeland. Whether we agree with this vision or not, it touches on fundamental questions. Who are we really? A body? A soul? Or both? Are we prisoners of matter? Or fully at home in this world? The Gospel of Judas does not give us a user manual, but it opens an abyss of questions. There is another question hiding behind this text. Who decides what is true in a religion? Over the centuries, Christian communities selected certain writings as canonical, meaning authoritative. Others were rejected as apocryphal, heretical, dangerous. This does not necessarily mean that the rejected texts are false and the accepted texts objectively true. It means that, in a given historical context, certain groups prevailed and others disappeared. The Gospel of Judas reminds us that, in the 2nd century, Christianity was far more diverse than we often imagine. There were debates, conflicting worldviews, and battles of interpretation. This text is like a window onto a parallel branch, a path that history did not retain, but that nonetheless existed. So when we read it today, it is not only Judas we rediscover. It is an entire era of tensions and spiritual experiments. So who is Jesus really? What does salvation mean? What is the meaning of the cross? In the end, the Gospel of Judas does not give us a conclusion. It leaves us with questions. So let's ask them openly. Who was Judas Iscariot? An eternal traitor? A misunderstood initiate? Or the reflection of our need to judge before we understand? Do we, today, have a view of Judas that is too simple? Can we really reduce him to 30 pieces of silver and a kiss in the night? Does this text undermine the faith of millions of believers? Or is it merely a mirror, showing us our modern obsession with secrets, conspiracies, and alternative versions? And above all, what does it change for us to think that the traitor could be an initiate, and that the good guys may not fully understand? Through Judas, our relationship to truth, to authority, to memory is being questioned. The Gospel of Judas is not a new Bible. It is a fragment, a shard of a vanished world. It is incomplete, controversial, and hard to interpret. But that is precisely what makes it fascinating. Through its damaged lines, we hear the echoes of a plural Christianity, troubled, searching for meaning. Judas, the cursed one, becomes here a troubling, ambivalent figure, neither wholly guilty nor wholly innocent. That history is more complex than simplified stories. That truth has many faces, and that the archives of humanity still hold forgotten voices. If you enjoyed this journey through history, hit like and subscribe to our channel for more mystical stories.